Great. Welcome to the stage, Fortinet's Matt Noon, the Senior Director for Security Operations, will moderate this session. Matt, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lucian. So good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good evening, depending on where from you're joining us. Thank you for joining the session here today. Our topic for today's session is AI-powered SecOps solutions, the pathway to proactive and resilient cybersecurity. So our expert panelists will discuss a practical approach for using AI and a threat-informed defense to protect your organization. So we'll discuss drivers behind implementing tools that use artificial intelligence and machine learning to ultimately reduce the time it takes to detect a threat and reduce the time it takes to respond to a threat. And whether that's through processes that are implemented or through an automated responsive action. So I'm your moderator, I'm Matt Noon. I'm Senior Director of SecOps Solution Sales with Fortinet. And here at Fortinet, we've been leveraging the early form of artificial intelligence and machine learning for well over 12 years at this point. And we found that really SecOps and our SecOps solutions is what's now driving our enhancements and continued development of those tools, and the implementation of Gen AI is really tied to SecOps and our SecOps solutions. I'll go around to introduce the panelists or give you the opportunity to introduce yourselves. Carlos, we'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. Matt, it's always a pleasure to be in these panels. My name is Carlos Benagno. I'm the CTO for Rotia Armes. My background is control systems engineering and cybersecurity for the last 10 years. So my role has always been helping the community to operationalize cybersecurity tools, to help protect their environments.
Great, thank you. John?
Yes, hello. Hi, everyone. I'm John Archer with Red Hat. I work in the ecosystem group here at Red Hat, helping identify hardware and software partners to build solutions that our customers care about and focused on industrial edge type of plays. And so I'm here to help tell you how we look at how we can help improve building a risk-reduced platform, while at the same time integrating solutions from our partners like Fortinet to build a better factory or complex or manufacturing type of environment. So thanks for having me.
Great, thanks for being here, John. And Carla.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much, Matt, for having me here on your panel, and it's nice to be on this panel today. So my name is Carla de Jong. I am a senior manager for our industrial system solutions for cybersecurity. I am working for Intel. I work in the Federal Aerospace and Industrial Solution Business Group. I'm tongue-tied this morning. I'm responsible for creating software product roadmaps and establishing partnerships with the ecosystem to really bring through a software-defined industrial automation solution and transformation. I've been in cybersecurity for most of my career, so I've gone from enterprise to consumer to OT security space, and I'm really excited about our conversation here today.
Likewise. Thank you, Carla. Again, thank you all for being here. I always like to start by polling the audience. We only have a couple polls here today, but let me do a quick poll. Should have just started. Is artificial intelligence integration for manufacturing and industrial control systems a consideration for your organization? So I'll give everyone a second to answer that, and then we'll get started. Great. So let's get going. Let's get into it. Let's level set on what is AI. What is AI? What is not AI? We've seen a lot of headlines around generative AI, Gen AI. And as I said, at Fortinet, we've been leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning for well over 12 years. It's technology that's been around. I would say it was available for most manufacturers as they looked at the convergence of IT and OT and started their digital transformation of sort of their journey. So available to them, not necessarily completely new. Carlos, what's your take? Is AI new? Is it new to manufacturing?
Well, it all depends on how you see it. The fact is, we have used some sort of machine learning or machine capability from an automation point of view. Really working on automating repetitive tasks when it comes to processes and getting a really a set of scripts and programming, looking at different data inputs, outputs, information, from a process perspective to automate these these processes and really just to get a task to go through the different values and get that information. And then that objective at the end. We also have seen in the past, even since the 80s, I remember, fuzzy logic controllers and fuzzy logic strategies, to predict machine failures, to identify patterns in the process. Sure. and make sure that we can actually, predict how these devices could actually fail in terms of processing. Neural networks as well. They all use different type of technologies and programming, to optimize performance of the processes, to adjust, process parameters, to really achieve those optimal results when it comes to to performance of the processes. So this is nothing new. But what we have seen, of course, is the advancement. Is the capability of processing a huge, a big amount of data and correlated all the information, to get better results.
You went way back to the 80s, but the 80s was just 20 years ago, right? 40 years ago now, dating myself. Some great points. So not necessarily new, but certainly an evolution. John, how about your perspective? How's AI, ML driving that digital transformation in manufacturing?
Yeah. So, to add on to his answer, AI is someone else's math, is the way I describe it sometimes. But in math at scale that humans can't do. But where I see, we work with a lot of process manufacturing companies and discrete manufacturers, and where they're trying to leverage this technology more broadly outside of SecOps story is a lot of computer vision, a lot of predictive maintenance, being able to build custom AI models that they can't buy sometimes is where we get involved. And it's really being able to, operationalize this stuff where someone's built a model, but they can't get it to scale in their business to help impact, make a change in the business. So that's where we get involved sometimes. But overall, the opportunity here is to get rid of, bad jobs, right? It's someone's job who's kind of boring or kind of redundant. In many cases could be replaced with a model, right? And or coming up with assistant AIs around how you do your process manufacturing to improve safety or resiliency, or in some cases actually improve the yield of the product. So that's where people get real excited, is when they say, hey, here's a new way to do something that we wouldn't have discovered through our traditional mechanisms for improving our, from who we're buying solutions today or how we're looking at things. One of the interesting things about AI is it comes up with unobvious paths to do something.
Right.
And that's where the innovation that people get excited about is like, here's maybe a new way to do something that we wouldn't have done on our own means.
Sure. Right. Well, and that's the big jump forward, right, is with Gen AI, making the headlines, big splash, a lot of attention around it, also maybe very high expectations. Carla, how about your comments as far as how this Gen AI is different from existing implementations of AI and machine learning?
Yeah, and I think, from both the comments is really just to add to that, right? If you look at what we've seen with our industrial customers, is definitely Gen AI is coming into the pictures, and is actually creating new opportunities. It's opening the door and is giving companies that competitive edge, right? Because Gen AI is about creating new product designs, new process automation, and the product design can be from cradle to grave. So there's naturally excitement around that, right? Just as give you example, we've seen in aerospace companies creating with Gen AI new fuel nozzles for jet engines, right? That are lighter, more sustainable, more cost effective. That's now just opened up a new market for them, right? So that's kind of the use case we're seeing. Traditional AI and machine learning, that's more what we're seeing is how do we enhance current processes or of technologies, right? So if we look, AI machine learning can detect when a machine's going to fail. Oh, okay, so now we know it's going to fail in X time. Let's schedule that maintenance in now. So it can be really complementary to the task that we have now, but then there's this new opportunity, right? There's other things that we obviously naturally have to take into consideration with Gen AI in a sensitive environment like manufacturing is data protection, right? It is safety, and then the trustworthiness of AI and all the decisions it's making.
Right.
And if you don't put those safety guardrails around this, we might have a safety hazard, or we might have IP that gets leaked, right? So organizations and industries are learning, right? It has been around for a while, but now it's really extra sensitive because of the attacks that are hitting this market.
Right.
So exciting times.
Great points. Some points of concern that we need to pay attention to, but also, as you said, a lot of things to be excited about. New tools, things to make us in cybersecurity more efficient. And at the same time, tools now available to us are available to threat actors.
Yes.
So let's talk about that threat landscape for a little bit. So Fortinet, we publish a global ransomware report. And in the 2023 global ransomware report, we identify ransomware as the top digital threat. And what's interesting is organizations in manufacturing, they had a tendency to pay the demanded ransom more often than other industries. And that ransom that was being requested or demanded was typically higher, where 25% of breaches in manufacturing, the ransom was over $1 million. And again, they had a tendency to pay that ransom more often than other industries. So Carlos, what's your take on manufacturers, their willingness to pay that ransom?
So there is always, the data doesn't lie. So there is a big amount of customers that, or manufacturing, personnel that the executive team that decide to pay, and there's a lot of reasons that I can think of. These systems are typically very old systems. There's a lot of legacy systems that are actually part of of a production environment, and that's inevitable. And from the get-go, they are designed for longevity. Was involved in a project that one of the requirements was that the system had to be designed to last at least 30 years. So in that kind of scenarios, because it's such a long time, they might not have proper business continuity plans to recover from an incident. In saying that, they might not have good incident response procedures because the systems are old, they don't have enough backups, they can actually lose the data, and they don't have a way to really recover this information very quickly. And of course, there's a pressure to deliver production and not have that financial impact that might affect the business and the reputation. In saying that, though, I have seen or have been experienced with some customers that they are global customers. They can afford to move that type of the production of the sites that have been impacted to a different production plant, and then they decide not to pay as well, and because they have the capability to move production to a different location. However, this still is a big effort. It's still a big engineering effort to recover from the failure, to take advantage, to even do hardware refresh and improve the cybersecurity policies inside it. But this processes always costs more than than the actual ransomware itself. But in the long term, they're prepared for another incident.
Right. So that makes sense as far as potential costs incurred to sort of recover or avoid paying the ransom could be greater than the ransom itself, or just in the interest of returning to productivity. It's understandable why that ransom might be paid. So to tie this back to some of the coming challenges with threat actors having access to these new tools, referencing that same report, our global ransomware report, where ransomware is identified as the top digital threat, email continues to be the top attack vector. And what's interesting is in prior year surveys, organizations responded that only about a third were actually intended to invest to improve the defense around email and that attack vector. In the next year, it increased a little bit. It was 40-something%. But now, if you consider, with Gen AI and an attack, a bad actor using Gen AI, you could see how you could pretty simply do a more persistent and effective email spear phishing campaign. So these tools can really change the game for threat actors, and we need to think about they're using AI. How do we fight AI with AI? And Carla, how should manufacturers take the good from AI to stay ahead of what's happening just across the threat landscape?
Yeah, and I'm so glad you asked for the good of AI, right? Because there's always so much around what can it not do, and we in security we naturally go to, hey, what is the risk and the fear and all of that. I think one of the key powers that AI can have is if you look at how much data. So if you are been in security for a long time, is it enterprise, OT, consumer, anything, right? If an attack happened, right, how do you get data? First, you need to understand the threat feeds, the dark webs, the social networks, monitoring, everything's happening. Now we can use Gen AI, for instance, that will go and analyze these massive amounts of data from all these different forums. It can start to monitor suspicious or anomaly behavior on your network, and then can actually start to look at all the incidents, security incidents that's coming through, and actually look at the details, the severity, if there's false positives, anything that is out there. And then it actually can also obviously isolate and control and isolate that attack. All these things is what Gen AI can do for us, but it can be complementary to us humans, right? And we can now focus on, I think, John, you mentioned earlier, it's like there were certain roles and tasks that we were doing, but now instead of us going to look at all these threat feeds, the dark web forums, what is happening, or is there a vulnerability in my supply chain? Now we have these Gen AI tools at a very large processing power. They can now analyze this data. So that, I think, is how we can use it, right? Yes, the hackers use a tool too as well, but now for protection and defense, this is how we can work with it.
Great points. John, how about around safety and availability? Where does AI fit in supporting those goals?
Yeah, and there's a couple different ways to interpret that, because I mean, part of it is, how you operationalize this stuff can, side by side with that is trying to harden your stuff properly, right? So the safety comes from like things like immutable operating systems, or coming from getting the human out of the loop altogether with some of this, and doing kind of like a GitOps for your environments. So coupled with that, though, is models that like what Carl was talking about with anomaly detection and real-time monitoring, is having incident response that's automated. So you don't, like, a lot of tools, like a lot of the legacy SIEMs can tell you what happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
They aren't so good at preventing your hey, you've been infected. Great, thank you for the information, right? It's being able to put together that real-time defense where, with a secure software, you have to think in terms of like securing the hardware and software supply chains of your environments end to end in order to get to this state, right? We know that's a long journey for a lot of these organizations that have 30 to 40 years of technical debt with assets that they cannot fully, they're dependent on things that they can't lock down the right way. So building these models and implementing this stuff with the automated response, like, we use our IT automation tools coupled with some of the Gen AI tools to help build those playbooks, for example, and then implement those changes in real time or near real time to keep up with new threats. And so, that's part of how we look at it. But yeah, obviously, like Fortinet has the SaaS, the secure edge stuff that can help play a role here, and being able to scan anything incoming is part of how you build a more risk reduced environment for our joint customers here. And so I think, there's a lot of tools in the tool shed here that need to be pulled together, but getting into more of a DevSecOps type of mentality, so that we're not, click opsing our way to a more secure environment. So hopefully that all made sense.
Yeah. How about regulatory considerations? Carlo, we talked a little bit before this session. I know you're close to it. You seem somewhat passionate about it. How have regulatory pressures changed the discussion around mitigation and requirements when managing a cyber threat?
Yeah, and I think I'll start off first off going, why are we seeing such a big explosion of regulations around cybersecurity? And I think the first step is to look at it and go, where are all the attacks happening? What markets are we starting to see these attacks happening? Well, in the last 3 to 4 years, we've seen an explosion of different kind of attacks happening on critical infrastructure markets. We've seen the edge markets. Can be called critical infrastructure, the edge, and this is manufacturing, retail, energy and oil, healthcare. These are all markets that are crucial for national security. So naturally, we're seeing globally and regionally is that governments and regulation bodies are creating more stricter regulations and supporting standards and frameworks around cybersecurity. And regulations in the past, it was always not mandatory, right? It's not optional anymore. It is becoming mandatory because of this risk of national security. And especially with bringing in these newer technologies on a more broader scales in organizations than in manufacturing, right? With Gen AI and AI, and how do we protect the data around that, right? So I think these regulations, so first of all, it was the threats. Where are the threats coming to? What markets? That drove a lot of these regulations and standards and policies. And now we've seen, how can we implement them? Now that's the next big one. Regulations and standards and frameworks that support them are complex. No denying, I think all of us who's listening or on this panel, we all know it is a team activity, right? From the silicon provider to the OXMs, to the OSVs, ISVs, and to our customers, we all have a role to play and to complement this. But I can't speak about regulations without speaking about really the CRA, which is there's two big ones at the moment for manufacturing. And the CRA is your Cyber Resilience Act. And this is a very big one that's coming out, right, that needs to be implemented. This really affects everyone that develops and deploys hardware, software, and it's from product design to end of life. You need to put in security. All right. And you will not be able to, if you don't meet certain requirements to the CRA, you will be fined. Let me remember it. It was 15 million euros or 2.5% of your revenue for the year. So a lot, right? If you don't spend that money, and if you don't do the security implications, but you also won't be able to sell your products into Europe. So this affects everyone, right? So now you get the whole concept of secure by design, secure by default, that now everyone who designs, is it hardware, is it software, anything, we have to think of that. So that's changing it. And then because we're speaking about AI here, we have the EU AI Act, all right? And the EU AI Act is, yes, it's been in the press a lot. And then we have more the Global AI Act, where I know it was the US, UK, and Europe, they all signed into that agreement last Friday. So a lot of things happening at the moment. But they, this one's slightly different to the Cyber Resilience Act. This one is more, if you look at the security components of the European AI Act, is like focusing on how do we secure AI? We've been speaking about how do we use AI for security. Now we're talking about how do we secure AI. And there are certain frameworks that define for us is like, how do we make sure that AI's use and behavior is not modified from its original intent? So there are all those things that are happening at the moment.
Anything else from the panel, Carlos or John?
Yes, probably I need to add, NIS2 in Europe as well is coming, and that's actually coming really strong. I think we've got only 1 month in Europe to start implementing measures. So the requirements just to mitigate, cyber threats, but also to, and more importantly, to, report incidents, which can be quite difficult, right? So you have to have very well established incident reports. And within the incident reports, you need to make sure that you report those incidents. In America, we have had for a long time now NextSIP as well when it comes to critical infrastructure, especially from power systems, bulk power systems, which is actually quite important to follow and adhere to it and meet the requirements. Again, you can get fined. Companies can get fined if they don't and they don't comply. But more importantly, it is becoming more obvious to everyone that the CISOs are going to be the one responsible, and the CISOs will actually be basically penalized, even put in jail if they don't do what it needs to be done in terms of regulation, which is actually can become quite scary because it becomes from a personal point of view. CISOs get responsible for cybersecurity in their environments.
Yeah, and I'll add too. So so in addition to CRA, we're tracking and actually in a process right now getting certified for 62443.
Yes.
From the IEC, and we're also we do 853 and PCI and but we do a lot of these things by there's a lot of overlap between a lot of these standards bodies on terms of what does that really mean in terms of the software and how do you ensure, how do you audit it, is there a declarative way of setting policies on this infrastructure? And so we've been building an operator for compliance, which you can express these rules, and there's different like XACML based type things that some folks are doing, but But between NIST 2 and 62443, customers their organizations are contributing to helping define what those standards are, particularly for critical infrastructure and OT. NIST 2 is kind of like a more secure version of the 62443, the way I look at it. But yeah, we're between the 4.1 to 4.2 is what we're currently targeting for our for our Linux, right? But then the way to operationalize this, we're trying to make it easier for customers to, if they put it on our platform, that comes with, right? So you can then you can reduce a lot of the anxiety that comes from a NERC SIP audit, for example, if you're a utility, if you're using this, so that you can't, basically it won't let you deploy things incorrectly that would create that putting stuff in the clear, or not having the encryption set right, or exposing endpoints that shouldn't be out there. So it gives you that kind of sanity check. And if, like I said, going back to if you get OPSIS right, it's all declarative architecture definitions. So you don't have to Bubba didn't have to remember, go click on this button. I hate to say it that way. That's part of what happens is when there is an incident, is they know better. They just operationally they didn't follow their own guidebook, right? So, so in case, hopefully that helps.
A question came from the audience that while we're on the topic, I think we could answer. It's around CRA and the EU AI Act. How do these regulatory frameworks differ from the proposed global AI Act that the US, UK, and EU just signed last week? Carla, you want to take that?
Yeah, so I think with the AI Act, more the global per se AI Act that just was getting signed last week, right? The big thing with that one was the EU AI Act was just for EU members, right? Now they're starting to open it up a little further on that. The other thing with the global AI Act is that they're focusing more on the ethics of the ethics of AI, and making sure that it's implemented correctly, right? So it's more focused on the behavior analysis of where is AI used, what are maybe the possible biases that AI can use, and all of those things. That's what the more general one is compared to what, but it is a component of the EU AI Act. Most of the time we see the EU a little bit ahead of the rest of the world, and then it starts to get adopted by the global market. They're stricter.
Great, thank you. So regulatory pressure is a consideration. How about other challenges? We typically see 3 common challenges when we talk about cybersecurity across almost every organization. The evolving threat landscape, the increased sophistication of attacks, alert fatigue, just the number of events that are generated, the amount of data that it creates, trying to process, make sense of all that data, and then going through the actual alerts and false positives. And then number 3 is the skill shortages. Now, typically you talk about skill shortages, you are referring to the challenge of finding, recruiting, and retaining talented cybersecurity professionals. But I like to include in that our users, your employees, really what is the first line of defense for an organization. And as we talk about more sophisticated email or spear phishing campaigns, really just one click is all it could take for a potential breach. I know it's easy to say, if it wasn't for our users, security would be easy, right? But with those new tools, with potentially very convincing chatbots and things like that, Carlos, do we have a new user challenge? How should we tackle this people element?
We have had this challenge for a long time, and I've been lucky to be involved in projects on site, working in the factories, and the amount of times that I saw sticky notes with the password on the monitors, private passwords and people password. It was incredible. So and internally we started to work around training. It's just the only way, right? So helping people to understand what are the best practices, how they need to manage the passwords. They're not transferable, but then people are people, and especially in those environments that they tend to do things in a certain way and very conservative and very hard to get them out of their old ways. And then you have to start implementing technology to basically enforce the use of passwords, make sure that they're strong password by implementing strong password policies in their systems, especially SCADA systems, and making sure that SCADA systems are controlled or managed by an authentication system like Active Directory, for instance, or even multi-factor authentication. And the problem is always the resistance, and it's always going to be that part of the resistance, which again, training will actually help them to overcome that challenge. And then you need to. One thing is to implement these controls, and the next thing is to test that the controls are actually working. You need to continue on assessing. Maybe making sure that the people they're employing are they don't have a background that instigate a problem with insider threats, or even have a third party to go and assess your security policies when it comes to passwords. And I love anecdotes. I had the experience that a company, or I was working for a company that we wanted to do a test of how deep we could go into a SCADA system or an OT system, and we contracted an attacker, and then simple things like he going into the office by asking, "No, I'm a contractor. I need to get into the office," and somehow tailgating, he got into the office and he sat down into a hot desk, and because it was hot desk, everyone else working in the office, he thought, well, it's a contractor, and he's in a hot desk, and what no one was actually looking at is what he was doing, what behaviors he was actually having. And then slowly he was doing social engineering, got the passwords, contacted the support team, because it was a local internal telephone, managed to actually get a password, go into the system, and to make the story short, he was able to log into the SCADA system. It's like a SCADA software, and to gain interface of the whole SCADA system. It's very scary, but it happens. It's actually, but then going back to, you need to assess this and making sure that you go back and review your policies, and again, go back and do the training and making sure it's not just phishing emails, it's actually beyond that, and what the capabilities are.
Right. Great points. But the rest of the panel, any comments there?
I'll say this, one of the things that, and this is, more targeted on the industries with critical infrastructure, water, power, energy related firms. They're one of the most attacked organizations, right? So, and those attacks have increased, factors here over the last few years. And part of it is because all these tools for how to attack, they seem to have better enablement on how to use the attack tools and how to do the protection, right? A lot of the enablement for how to use a lot of the the white hat tools, let's say, right, are they're behind paywalls, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas the stuff for the other guys is spread out everywhere, right? And so that's something we ought to change, right? We ought to make it easy and not necessarily have to monetize the enablement of how to use these technologies, right? And one other quick thing is, we have something called a Red Hat Red Hat Research, in which it's trying to get to potential folks in this space earlier. Right now, it's college. We're reaching out to universities to, build security-related projects as like their senior thesis project or PhD candidates. And so having them come in with, how to use open source, how to, just how to build software is really where we focus. Whether it's whether it's a products that Red Hat sells or not, it doesn't matter. But overall, it's better alignment with the university in understanding how we can build better candidates that are more informed about the challenges. And the last thing is, like, we do an annual capture the flag event, right? And so you could do these as hackathons with your customers or whatnot, but getting better at the pen testing and doing things like CTF. It shouldn't just be a dev con where these things happen. You should be doing your own orgs and get everyone in, like, have people that have no idea what this stuff is to participate in a CTF event. And then I know your email issues will go down for one thing. So, but yeah, there's all kinds of ways to improve awareness and get better at the enablement for leveraging these technologies, because it's high tower stuff and a lot of orgs.
Right.
So,
Carla, anything to add on?
I think, Carla, you are on mute.
Hey, there we go, on a panel. Thank you. Sorry, apologies for coughing early on. No, it's, and I want to add an extra comment. So if you look at the industrial manufacturing space, for the people awareness and the training, the most important thing for decades has been safety. It's like, how can what is my job and how can I make sure this is a safe environment? Now, with all these attacks happening, this is where security awareness training is so important, because it is a mind shift, right? With all of us, we have to shift and change through different technology evolutions, and we need to learn. So I just wanted to add that with security in manufacturing is always security and safety, right? That's what we see, and then that enhancement on that.
Right, great point. I'm going to start another poll here. Hopefully that goes out around, is your workforce ready to manage an AI implementation? I'll give everyone just a couple of seconds to answer that. Okay. How about around the convergence of IT and OT? Does that create additional challenges and complexities for manufacturing organizations? John, I'll go to you. What changes come into play?
Yeah, so I'll start with the one that, it's not really technology. I mean, there's different languages, that IT and OT folks use. For many shops I work with, it's fully air gap, full Purdue, type environments. But it's when they're, a lot of this becomes budget control, to be honest, right? They've consolidated some of the purchasing decisions, and so they start looking at we're buying the same thing for the same problem. We're just calling it different things in some places. Mm-hmm. But there's different ilities that these guys appreciate, and safety. One of my customers, there is no bonus program outside of their safety protocols, right? So an incident is the only thing that they're worried about. But this comes down to culture. This is everything that we're dealing with. It's like we have the ability to run the business this way. It's just culturally we don't, and because of things have matured and modernized past where I think some of the business owners come from, right? And so how we can listen a little differently or understand the value here. I think most of these guys, like in the OT side, it's like, if you can't give me an OEE claim directly, I don't want to hear it, right? And so, but ultimately what we're trying to do is have folks look at how they operate their systems a little differently and understand what the risk is fundamentally, so that they can take a new approach. So that's one of the things around this whole IT-OT convergence is get people in the same room maybe a little job swapping in some
Right.
cases. And then you can come up with look more end-to-end, more theory constraint style thinking about how to improve your org.
So we'll see a definite shift there. You know, as you said, you need to come up with some new approaches. Carla or Carlos, any suggestions on security strategies that manufacturers should be thinking about, certain technologies?
Do you mind if I go?
You go, Carla, you go.
Thank you.
Because that's my bread and butter, so I can actually just go and speak about that all day.
Oh, okay. One of the, I'm just going to, obviously mention colonial pipelines, right? If you look at IT and OT and how they're converging, right? Colonial pipeline is a perfect example, right? So this is unfortunately a famous attack, right? Because the exposure was on a weak password on the VPN between the IT and OT network, right? And that's why colonial pipelines then shut down the OT side of the network. So it is very important. I just wanted to add it from what John was saying, is that per se, you can't take what is an IT policy and what is an OT policy and just go, oh, okay, I'm just going to apply my IT to my OT and vice versa. It is two very different environments, and we need to apply the right things. And that's where that merges from a security perspective, and the solutions that we are seeing from all our companies here is like, how do we bring that together, right? The other thing, it does start, I will say, it does start with hardware, right? Because if you have a PCI or HMI device in your factory plant or on the factory floor, it's a hardware device, right? And then it has the OS, it has the hardware, the firmware, the OS, it has the software, the applications, it goes up. Everyone has a layer, right? But it does start at the hardware. And then from the hardware perspective, you really should be looking at a few key things. It's security, it's safety, and data protection. And that's where, in particular, for AI and what we've seen out there. So we need to have devices that can handle, be accelerated AI hardened devices, because it needs to handle so much data. But then it's also handle so much encryption. How do you make sure there's no IP leaks, right? And then on top of that, there's zero trust. How do we make sure, in fact, anyone who's trying to authenticate, we verify and authenticate them, is it to a device, to an application, to AI, right? But from the hardware perspective, it is also very important. You have those default features across most hardware platforms, but then it complements the software layer, so it's easier to go to market with all the different solutions. And that's what we're doing here with all of you as well.
Great suggestion. So, Carlos, maybe build on that, but also something else to keep in mind, and referring back to that global ransomware report and what we saw from polling different respondents, was where they intended to make investments. 57% said it was IoT security, 53% next-gen firewalls, 51% in EDR. So those were the top three. Clearly deciding which technology to invest in is important. So maybe build on that a little bit and touch on from your view, those important technologies to consider, what they should be investing in.
Yeah, exactly. So, the complexity when it comes to OT environments in manufacturing environments is from the start is the visibility. Okay. So when you look at IoT security, and the reason why the manufacturers are investing more in this type of technology is because they simply don't know what they have. And this is actually something, it's a common problem across all the customer base, and then they feel the biggest investment needs to be around looking at understanding, discovering, and identifying all these devices in the OT networks. you can't really protect, an OT network when, you don't know where the entry points are, when you don't know what type of devices you have, how these devices are behaving, how they are communicating to each other. You talk about air gap networks in manufacturing, but the reality is that these networks are not truly air gap. There is a lot of information that is required to transverse, from the OT into the IT, for scheduling, reporting, performance improvements, and so forth. So then there is a lot of integration between devices and communications between devices. And then they feel like, first of all, I want to look at the IoT security, look at all the OT or ICS devices, industrial control systems devices. As Carla mentioned before, these devices are hardware-based devices. You don't really have an operating system. You have a firmware version, so you can't really install agents. So you need to invest more money in understanding these devices by looking at specific methods to discover these devices, passive methods, active methods. And then once you have that visibility, and how you understand how these devices behave, how they communicate to each other, what protocols they need, and then the next phase is network segmentation, and that's why they use next generation firewalls, because they want to automate the process as much as they can, because again, in manufacturing environments, it's not easy to automate. It's not easy to block the communication of a SCADA server to a PLC, because you lose visibility, and then you need to actually have a smarter technology and again using AI, first of all, to understand what type of device it is, and secondly to understand the business criticality of the device, and then interface with next generation firewalls, interface with EDRs, then to is in a smart way isolate in case of an incident or a threat. So that's why you see the trend is actually I want to invest more in the IoT security. I want to put more effort in that, so I understand what I need to protect, and then I move into isolating the networks using next generation firewalls, so that I understand I can control how my IoT network interface with the external networks, and then protect the endpoints with EDRs, once I understand what devices I have to protect, and that's all part of the visibility that you need to gain.
Right. John, did you have anything to add to that?
Well, I'll say this, and I don't want to contradict anything Carlos saying. There are ways now where you can do ingress and egress in software, right? And so there is modernizing the Purdue model now is something that we're it's early days, right? But there's like code assist as a virtual PLC or like a containerized PLC can be ingress egress controlled through we'll say infrastructure code or factory as code if we can start talking that way, right? So, but yeah, there's so much legacy and so much brownfield here that we're going to have to do the traditional methods here, and but over time, I see we can get this to where the workload and the network configuration can be in that GitOps pipeline for how to deploy these things. And so as we move to this more modern way, it can dramatically reduce the setup time as well as any downtime. If I want to add a new service unit, a new service line, make changes. We've been working with some of the OT vendors to do Ansible-based PLC set points, so I can actually change how my fine grain, the very my parameters for how I'm operating my line could be altered without having to go run around with a USB stick, right? And so this is how we can do things at scale a little differently, but still, we got to move all this stuff. We got to shift left on all these concerns about the security, so that using DAS tools over SaaS tools, for example, that's the way forward, right? So.
Yeah, and no contradiction there at all, John, right? It's like we obviously have the hardware as well, but yeah, there is things like how do we do workload consolidation? How do we do it with containers? And we all having these new models. So it's almost like a mixed kind of environment. And in particular in manufacturing, it is definitely all mixed, right? So I think we all evolving on multiple different levels, but it's a mixed environment of the both.
I have customers still are certificates are hard for them. Is where the reality of things are, right?
Right.
So it's you're going back to the enablement story. There's a lot of enablement to get OT engineers to be able to wield software, wield their environments as like a GitOps pipeline. So.
Mm-hmm.
So just 3 minutes left till the top of the hour. We'll go around, and I'll ask everyone for maybe one thing that a manufacturer could do now to leverage AI. And if you were to peek into your crystal ball a little bit, looking farther out, what's an application of Gen AI that would really fit or somehow support manufacturing? We'll go clockwise on my screen. Carla?
So I think short term, so one of the key things that manufacturing customers can use is look at implementing AI-based anomaly detection, right? A detection that can look at both IT and OT specific. I think that can help reduce downtime, can give you early warning signs of attacks that are happening. I think that's one thing they can immediately start doing now, right? The other thing in my crystal ball, I think I started off the discussion on I do see Gen AI opening new doors and opportunities in the marketplace, but we need to look at that from a security perspective, and I think it really can optimize a lot of the process that's involved with security, right, and automating a lot of that. So I am pretty excited. Of course, we got guardrails, but I am pretty excited of where this can go forward with.
Great. John?
So I'll be a little more boring because really it is crawl, walk, run, right? And so, really just start, I use this term a lot, automating the automation, right? And so usually that's, some way of how can you deploy at scale and so you can start iterating quicker. So typically it's, can I deploy my PLC, my DCS, my HMI, SCADA, whatever it is, in some sort of automated fashion at scale. And then from there, getting down to where, the end point here for a lot of my customers is autonomous production, let's say. A lot of use cases is getting a human out of active use cases are getting people out of unsafe places. And this is offshore, this is chemicals, it's so I could replace, a guy with a camera and do computer vision use cases. That's a lot of what we work on, but it starts with that kind of basic building block of, can I automate my work? So that's the starting point for when we interact with the shop.
Good answer. Carlos, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with both comments, especially Carla. In enhancing what Carla's mentioned, not just enhancing security using AI, but also enhancing the way first of all we design processes and how we implement the processes into the automation, into the PLCs, and how do we write the code in the PLCs using AI. So we're looking for efficiency, better performance, better quality, and of course better safety for the end users.
Awesome. That brings us right to the top of the hour. Thank you, panelists, for participating in the session, and thank you everyone for attending. We just put a last poll, just asking for a simple grade on the session, what you took out of it. Thanks again. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.